And Nancy, do we have recording?
We do. We have started recording.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. All right. So obviously the recording and the slides will be available after this session. So the library workplace bully versus the wholehearted librarian. What is this session about? In such a positive, uplifting, wholehearted libraries conference, I was a little hesitant to propose this topic, but it did have some interest. So first of all, I wanted to say my name is Sharon. I'm an associate librarian at Central Connecticut State University. So this means that I'm tenured, which means that I'm very fortunate and I have a lot of gratitude to give to my colleagues who saw me through a really arduous process. And I am very, very grateful. So also wanted to say that obviously, while this is a research-based presentation, any opinions I give are my own due to academic freedom, hurrah, and not the position of the library or Central Connecticut State University. I also wanted to say thank you to San Jose State University for putting on all of these great global online conferences. I have been in attendance so many times to so many of these things. And I'm both grateful and somewhat terrified to be presenting, but I want to thank them because they do great work. They build up our field a lot, and we have a lot to say thank you for. So, all right, so how did we get to the topic of bullying when we were talking about wholehearted librarianship? Well, for me, it started with a lot of attention to the Me Too movement. Probably like a lot of you, you saw headlines, you saw information, you saw your Twitter feed blowing up with this Me Too movement. And at the same time, I will say, are people not hearing me? I'm noticing that Sierra's having some problems, but I think Nancy can help you out. So in the meantime, so what happened here at our campus was that we had a brand new president and a brand new administration at the same time as a lot of this Me Too stuff was coming up. And I think what was happening was our new president, our new administration really wanted to take a look at campus climate, which I think is a brilliant thing to do for reasons that you'll see as I cover some of the research that's been done in this area. And so I think you'll see that there's a strong relationship between sort of issues of harassment and issues of bullying in the workplace. So today we're going to cover what is workplace bullying? What does it look like? How much does it happen in workplaces, including in libraries? What effects does it have on the targets of bullying? I won't call them victims because I want them to have agency. The witnesses to those bullying interactions because it's tough on them too, and on the organization as a whole. And then I want to discuss what we can do about that. So there hasn't been perhaps as much in the field of librarianship, perhaps as much in the way of scholarly literature on bullying in the workplace, but there has been some. And I want to call out a really good YALSA article from 2016 called Surviving a Bully at Work, in which one of the authors talked about how they never thought a superior of theirs would end up bullying them. They're polite, they work hard, they come across as helpful and cordial, go out of their way to offer excellent customer service, and treat everyone they work with the same. So this is a wholehearted librarian. So then they find themselves in the place where they feel like their manager is mistreating them, ridiculing them, terrifying them. Most of all, the thing that bothered them was that he terrified them into believing that they couldn't seek help. And so I think in some ways, this is a silent epidemic that happens in our workplaces, and it does have some real negative impacts. In addition, some additional library research that's taken place was published out in 2018, and it's from Hak Jun Kim, Carol Geary, and Arlene Bielfield. They published in Library Leadership and Management. And what they had done was a survey to librarians in the New England area through listservs. So it was sort of like a self-selected survey in a certain way. And they had both close-ended questions to sort of measure bullying and whether or not people had either experienced or were currently experiencing bullying, and open-ended questions wherein people could recount experiences or make comments. And this is a really good one. I think it says, I've seen pervasive bullying throughout all libraries, public and academic, that I've worked at, normally by coworkers, and the bullies are long-standing women employees, both librarians and support staff. If you're ever able to expand your research, it would be good to include the effects on other employees who end up being bystanders, whistleblowers, etc., and are also affected by the negative toxic atmosphere that bullying behavior creates. So I think there's two important pieces to this quote. One is the gendered aspect of this, and much of the research on workplace bullying, you'll see that it's usually male on female. The majority of supervisor to subordinate bullying instances happen male to female. However, our field is heavily dominated by women, right? And currently we have this gender imbalance, and yet we do see this female on female sort of psychosocial workplace violence, let's say. And I think it's an interesting point. At the same time, you know, we've talked about increasing the diversity and equity in our profession. We really want a diversity of perspectives in librarianship. We know we'll make better decisions. We know our libraries will be more wholehearted if we can be more inclusive and if we can recruit people into our workplaces who are people of color, people from various ethnic minorities. But bullying is a kind of abusive conduct. It supplements, exacerbates the mistreatment that may or may not have its basis in the race of the bullied target. So I think if we were to address the issue of bullying, I think we would also reduce some of the problems with recruitment and retention of people of color in our field. And I think that's really important. So what about workplace bullying worldwide? What does the literature tell us? Again, there's a lot of social science research, a lot of organizational behavior and social psychology research into this topic. And one of the studies that I found that tried to sort of normalize across different industries and across different countries found that between 10 to 20% of working adults have experienced or are currently experiencing bullying. In the US, the Workplace Bullying Institute is sort of the top nonprofit that deals with issues related to workplace bullying. And I will put many links throughout these slides off to their website. They actually got Zogby to run a survey back in 2014 about workplace bullying. So in the US, and I'm sorry, but I am US centric, so apologies to people from other nations, but I will mention some of the legal systems because some of you guys actually have more protections than we do in some of the other nations out there. More than 25% of people who were surveyed had been targets of bullying, and more than 21% had witnessed bullying. So that was from a 2014 survey. So what's kind of just disorienting is that bullying is surprisingly common in our helping fields. You could almost picture bullying happening in sort of like Wall Street, hard charging, you know, high profit center kinds of fields. But it's interesting to see and problematic to see it in healthcare, education, public service. So this means working for a governmental agency, and librarianship and academia are most definitely not immune from this. So in Kim et al.'s work that they published in 2018, they got back a sample size of about 567 people who responded to their survey. And if we just aggregate the number of people who had been bullied or were being currently bullied, it was average of 46% of our colleagues, right? And that's huge. You look at the breakdown by type of organization, and you see that there's a statistically significant increase in the amount of bullying that occurs in academic types of libraries and special libraries, although the sample size is a little low on special libraries. But either way, those were the sort of two more prone to bullying types of library workplaces. Public, a little bit less so, and school, even less so. But again, small sample size. But I thought this was really interesting and instructive. Okay, so let's talk about the definitions. There are a lot of definitions. Some people say, some people would say that this makes it hard for us to actually fix the problem. I wouldn't say so. I would say that if you read enough of these studies, you can start to see that while there are some minor discussions about whether, like the amount of time that this has to be taking place, the amount of incidents that have to take place in terms of measuring from a social scientist point of view, there's still sort of a core understanding of this as the creation of a hostile work environment. It is the repeated health-harming mistreatment of one or more persons by one or more perpetrators, and we'll get into the more perpetrators in a bit, or repeated and persistent negative actions toward one or more individuals which involve a perceived power imbalance and create a hostile work environment. It's thus interpersonal aggression or hostile antisocial behavior in the workplace. I think we can all agree on that. So some interesting things about the dynamic. People do not always know the term bullied or want to say that they've been the victim of bullying, right? Because it has that victim term, right? But they do know something is off, something is very unfair in their treatment, or that some of the behaviors are just wrong, just unfair. A study that was conducted in 1999 in the UK found that only half of the respondents who reported experiencing persistent and enduring negative acts, which would otherwise be classified as bullying, self-identified as being bullied. Now, it may be more now, that may not still be the case because there has been more publicity on the issue of workplace bullying and the negative effects and the costs it has to industry and to organizations. But it's worth noting that there are people out there who may be suffering a lot of things in their workplace without necessarily really understanding the dynamic. Bullies may be unaware of their behavioral patterns and effects on others. There are separate studies on psychopathy in the workplace, right? So we know that there are people, but it's a tiny minority of people who have sort of psychopathy. They have sociopathy, they have, I'm not a psychologist, but they definitely, when you read the studies, they indicate that they don't have empathy like normal people. In many cases, however, we see bullying behavior in the workplace where people aren't really understanding how strongly they are affecting their subordinates, or they think, or they learn that this was an okay way to manage, or whatever it is, or without really understanding their influence. So I think that's why we have to talk about this. It is a power play. It is a means of controlling a target. It's often against someone who seems threatening for some reason to the person who does the bullying behavior. And again, I don't necessarily want to say bullies, because I don't think anything is necessarily fixed in stone. I think there is a chance for us to work with people and improve behaviors. If a workplace does not offer a means of addressing bullying, and they do not have preventative policies, bullying targets really feel they have nowhere to turn, even when they recognize what's happening. 41% of women and 36% of men quit their jobs, and many of them end up unemployed long-term because of this. So there are some social science assessment instruments that have been statistically tested to see sort of, without using the term bullying, what kinds of negative works happen, what kind of negative acts happen at work. And so there are scales such as the Workplace Aggression Research Questionnaire and the Negative Acts Questionnaire, just so you know. But to sum it all up, some of the issues are, what does bullying look like? The behaviors can be threatening and intimidating. It can be sort of like threatening your job, implying that you won't have your job. It can be intimidating to the point where somebody stands in your way when you try to leave their office. You know, they physically impose upon you. It can be social isolation and exclusion in sort of a mean girls way. And I would say, I'm concerned about that type of activity because I do think we're going to get more neurodiverse people in our workplace in the future. And if they already are having challenges with dealing, you know, people with ADHD, people somewhere on the autism spectrum, a library should be a welcoming place for them to work. But if there's this type of toxic behavior, they're going to be at an especial disadvantage. Undermining your reputation, gossiping about you, just sort of like verbal abuse, unfair mistreatment, false accusations, withholding information. Interestingly, in our field, of all places for someone to withhold information can be really costly. Sabotage, not providing the necessary tools, resources, time, or help someone needs, setting someone up for failure with perhaps an unmanageable workload, or perhaps by moving the goalpost on them, not providing clear documentation that helps them definitely reach their performance goal, micromanaging, undercutting their self-confidence, subjecting them to practical jokes, removing projects for no clear reason and then assigning them to menial low-value tasks, reducing their opportunities in general for promotion, for talking to other people in other branches, let's say, professional development. They might like put them in lousy office space. You know, of course, granted, a lot of office spaces in our workplaces are not that great, but you know what I mean. There's different ways that bullying can take place. There's different techniques that bullies have used. But what bullying is not, and I want to be really clear about this, is that it is not a disagreement or a debate, no matter how passionate. As we invite more and more diverse people with more and more diverse views, one of the great things that can help us is having that diversity and having those important debates, right? I think where it can go over the line into bullying when it becomes a campaign against an individual, right? But I really want to make clear that we still have the ability to talk in this field, and it's super important that we do. Personality conflict, it's not just a personality conflict. Sometimes the HR people who are unaware of the social science research that's been done on bullying will try to minimize the issue. Where you have a power disparity, it's not just a personality conflict, and in most cases there is a power disparity in this dynamic. It is not simply a constructive attempt to improve an employee's performance. If you, in good faith as a supervisor, are providing feedback, and even if it has some negative parts to it, if it is clear, fair, and helps coach your employee to greater performance, then that's not bullying. And unfortunately, bullying is not illegal in the United States at this point in time. It is not, and as far as I'm aware, none of the states where we've tried to get laws passed have actually passed them yet, although some of them have made it to committee, but they pretty much die in committee. So there's a lot of work to be done on this. In some of the other nations, you guys do have laws against bullying in the workplace. I don't know how hard it is to win on those cases, but just giving you a heads up. Also, disclaimer, I'm not an attorney and I'm not even a law librarian, but I've done a lot of research in this topic area. So what's the difference between bullying, incivility, and harassment? So we all know that we all have bad days, right? We can come into the workplace and we can have kind of like, and bring less than positive energy in sometimes. Ideally we don't, but it happens. And sometimes you can have a strong disagreement with someone. Things happen. Ideally, again, we have a sort of code and an understanding and a norm of civility in our workplaces. But what incivility is just sort of more low intensity type of thing. It has ambiguous harm. In other words, it could be a one-time incident that's resolvable, and it doesn't really make the person on the receiving end feel particularly targeted. It can tip into bullying, which usually includes, as I mentioned, a power disparity, a power dynamic. So it's your supervisor, or it's a group of people mobbing you, which I'll talk about. Repetition, ongoing, and greater duration. So it's sort of an ongoing, constant thing. And so bullying targets often feel like they don't even want to go into work. You know, they might throw up before they go to work or something. They might feel that sick about it. And that's really not the way it should be, but it does happen. Harassment is a different thing in the United States. Unfortunately, we do have some legal protections for harassment, right? So harassment is unwelcome conduct based on race, color, religion, sex, including pregnancy. So if you're being discriminated against because of your status as a pregnant woman, you also have an opportunity to say something potentially. National origin or age, if you're 40 or older, it's not for super young people, sorry. Disability or genetic information. However, for it to rise to the level of legality, this is from the EEOC's website, and you should go there if you are interested in this, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, I believe it is. But what they say is petty slights, annoyances, and isolated incidents, unless extremely serious, will not rise to the level of illegality. So the point of illegality is when the conduct creates a hostile work environment. There is legal recourse in the US, but it can be challenging. So mobbing is a type of bullying. And again, Bullying is a situation which is not officially illegal, but I think it's something that our profession needs to call out. If we want people to come in, you know, I know people love their jobs, and I think that they should be encouraged to bring their whole selves to work. But what happens with these bullying situations is that they aren't, they're discouraged. So the mobbing is a type of bullying where a group of people really just sort of target one person. It's a mean girl thing. It's what it kind of looks like through innuendo, rumors, public discrediting. You know, one person can get a bunch of other people to sort of really target one of their colleagues, and it's an unfortunate thing. There was an early in the workplace bullying literature, there was, I think, a Scandinavian researcher who used to call all bullying mobbing, but not all bullying is mobbing. Sometimes it's sort of bullying can be one-on-one, but mobbing is where there's multiple people, right? And they may not, none of them may be your supervisor. It may just be that a group of them are sort of ganging up on you. Okay, gaslighting is something that you often see in domestic violence relationships. It's something that's been discussed a lot because of the political climate in the US right now, gotta be honest. It's a psychosocial manipulation technique. The goal of the person who's gaslighting someone else is to just disorient them, to make them not believe what is true, right? Like if I say it's X, you say it's Y. If I say it's down, you say it's up. And you assert it with such indignation. It's to distort your sense of truth and your own core beliefs about yourself, or to trivialize what you say. So there's a lot of aspects to gaslighting, and there's been a lot of research in that area lately. So for bullying, why do we have to address it as a field? Beyond the issues of diversity that I mentioned, which is a huge one, what this costs individuals who are targets of bullying is just so great. It's terrible. It's terrible. It's stress. It can yield post-traumatic stress disorder. We've got physical health harms, cardiovascular. You can have all sorts of issues. People have had heart attacks, right? Insomnia, susceptibility to illness. Mental health, you can lose some of your mental equilibrium. You can be increasingly sensitive. You can have more of a negative affect. You can lose self-confidence and self-efficacy, which makes you, of course, less productive at work, which is a problem. And then it feeds into that whole bullying cycle. You might feel like withdrawing from a social circle has a lot of negative effects on family life, because what will happen is the target will go home and they just can't believe that they're being targeted. So they'll go on and on to their loved ones, and then the loved ones get tired of it and they feel like they're being bullied too, because like third-hand bullying or second-hand bullying. So it's got like a lot of negative effects. Most cases, when it's a severe bullying case, people feel they have to leave their jobs. 41% of females and 36% of males usually leave their jobs. And that's just really unfortunate. It shouldn't be like that. For the organization, what you lose is there's huge costs in terms of increased employee turnover and reduced retention. And I would say reduced recruitment. We've got new, fresh librarians who we all are interested in having join our workforce. But if they hear about some completely unfair behaviors and hostile work environments, do you really think that they're going to be that interested in working in our library, right? There's a lot of cost to this. I had heard the figure that getting a new employee, like turnover of one employee, costs you $40,000 in terms of lost time and effort because it takes so long to get them up to speed. We could lose the best and brightest in our field. It could be, you know, it's not like our field pays so much money. It's possible that we have some real techie kind of person or someone, just all of us are very bright, right? But if they get into the field and then they find a lot of bullying going on, then why should they be in libraries? We're not even walking the walk that we claim, you know, we claim for ourselves. Even witnesses are known to leave workplaces where bullying takes place at a 21% rate. There's a lot of sick time and attendant costs from EAP, costs from having to go to mental health counseling, demoralization of the entire staff. It can become a really toxic culture. There's reduced efficiency, productivity. We're looking for creativity and innovation in the world, and that won't happen if we've got these kinds of dynamics going on. We reduce everybody's energy because everybody's energy is busy with something that probably shouldn't be happening. So there are correlates, there are organizational characteristics that correlate to bullying, such as stressful conditions in the industry, reduced resources, right? And we've all seen that. Rigid hierarchies, role confusion or conflict is a problem. Competition is a problem. Where there's high prestige positions working with lower level employees. Two leadership styles that are known to correlate with bullying are either authoritarian leadership or extreme laissez-faire leadership. And the promotion and tenure process itself has some risks to it. All right, so if you're targeted, okay, we got 5 minutes left, sorry. If you're targeted, please go to the Workplace Bullying Institute. You can go to HR and your Office of Diversity and Equity, right? A lot of people I know who are in support groups for people who are targets of bullying say that their HR experience has been less than positive, and I've seen the same thing with union. I have seen one study which suggested that people go 2 levels up, because what happens is people who conduct that bullying tactic, right, the one thing that they won't do is they won't show their true stripes to someone up the chain, right? So their immediate boss they usually cozy up to, and then they bully down to individuals who are seen as vulnerable in some way. So if you can skip up 2 levels, you get a more objective ally potentially, although that can be dangerous. Please keep your documentation. Don't keep it locally. Don't keep it on your work email. Build a timeline of events, because each single event can be really, sort of sound trivial, but when you add them all together, it becomes an issue. And if you leave a workplace due to poor climate, please leave a review on one of those employer rating websites such as Glassdoor, because it may help someone else. Now, here's my own personal practice. I work on building my own resilience, right? And I think that, we can all do that. Consider our own core ethos, right? I did some research for a professor of nursing, because the field of nursing has addressed this issue very heavily. And she wanted to know how she could get her students to be more mindful of how they behave in work. And so I found this Clark Workplace Civility Index, and I use that to remind myself how to behave a little bit, so that I can try and be my best self and bring my best self to work. The 4 Agreements, for me, that book by Don Miguel Ruiz is very comforting and reminds me to aspire to something. So guidance for bystanders. There is some places you can go for bystander training. It's usually designed for students, right? Like a lot of the bullying work that's done out there is for kids in school. That's great. Start there. There is an anti-harassment bystander guide at ihollaback.org. The Hollaback Project wants to stop harassment. So when you see things at events, you could stand up, and there's sort of a guide for bystanders. And above all, let's advocate for policies against bullying. Guidance for organizations. Only 9% of those people, of those libraries surveyed by Kim et al. In 2018 showed only 9% had an anti-bullying policy. There's no reason why our libraries can't get that together. We need to work on our staff's psychosocial safety in addition to their physical safety. Bullying may not be against the law yet, but someday it probably will be, hopefully. Skill up anyone who manages people, because sometimes it's a poor management issue. They've never been taught to manage properly, not just Title IX training. They need to learn to manage without reverting to bullying tactics. Okay. Call for action in our profession. So the American Nursing Association has actually called this out as an issue. And ALA really needs to call it out as the issue that it was, because I think it is very disorienting. We are here in good faith, right? We think that we're here because we really believe in our mission. We really believe in our ethics. And we believe in like what the ALA offers to us in the Code of Professional Ethics for Librarians. They say, we treat coworkers and other colleagues with respect, fairness, and good faith, and advocate conditions of employment that safeguard the rights and welfare of all employees of our institutions. But we're not seeing that in practice. Okay, it's 1:30. I am so sorry. I can I'm wondering if I can continue. Nancy, do you think that I can continue for those who want to stick around? I don't want to keep people, hold people up. If people do want to contact me afterwards, I will give you my email address and my Twitter handle. And please do take a look at the slides because there's some more resources in there. Maybe that will help. And I wish you all good luck. Please, please, you know, be safe out there and be good to one another, okay? All right, if anybody wants to stay and wants to ask questions, I don't want you to miss any of the rest of this great conference, but I'm here to take some questions. You're quite welcome, Carla. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Linda, Michael, Taylor M, Mahogany, Simon. I'm glad to hear that. Andrea, Emma. If anybody's still having any bullying issues and wants to ask me questions off list, please feel free to do so, seriously. Yeah, you know, I wish I had heard this presentation 15 years ago. I hear you. Okay, you have a coworker you'd like to help? Okay, so that's going to be kind of a deep conversation, isn't it? Kimberly, do you want to email me? You're welcome to do so. You may have to nudge me twice because sometimes I need that, but all right, I'm a strong believer in us all helping each other through this. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry that you feel disheartened though, because honestly, I think we can do this. I think it can be fixed. I just think it's got to be called out as what it is. And honestly, if we can call out bullying itself, then we can really get to the heart of some of the issues that, you know, like officially, legally, they get away with stuff, you know, because, oh, well, you can't say 100% that that's race related, right? And that's how they legally get away with some things that are kind of harassing. And we don't want that, you know, so I totally think we can do better. Yeah, please, for the slides, yeah, feel free to copy them. I forgot to put the CC license that I wanted to put on them. Apologies, I will do that. Yeah, microaggressions are tough. Microaggressions are really tough. I think that's a whole conversation to be had too, because a lot of people, a lot of us, you know, I have privilege. I'm a white woman, you know, some of us we're just ignorant, you know, but hopefully we're all behaving appropriately. Good, I'm glad to see a manager out there. Yeah, unfortunately, when the bullying is embedded high up, we have huge problems, right? You know, I actually had a manager once tell me, you know what rolls downhill? That was his answer for everything. So ideally, you get the kind of hope that I got with our new administration at our campus. I'm really excited about her and her approach to dealing with all of the issues of diversity, sexual harassment, and anti-bullying. And the fact that she rolled that into the whole issue, you know, then that really gave us some power. Yeah, you're right. So bullies are unfortunately, when they find a powerful position, they kind of keep it because I think they know someday they're going to get called out otherwise. And, you know, if there's ways to make policies so that it becomes equitable and so that there becomes a standard and norm of behavior, then perhaps what we can do as a field is move us forward. Yeah, it's tough. Yeah. I also think, yeah, a lot of people don't have a management background, then they end up being appointed, you know. When we do these library leadership institutes, I'd really like to see the library leadership institutes take on bullying itself as a topic, as well as issues of diversity and equity. I can stay on here another 10 minutes if you'd like, but Nancy, I don't want to take up all your time either. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I was going to say though that if no one has any questions, I'm going to stop the recording now.
Oh, yes, thank you.